How does the movie enrich reading Tolstoy's work, and what should viewers watch out for?
Well, there's obviously a big difference between a movie and a book. I mean, my novel is, hundreds of pages and very complicated, and a film can't do layering of points of view very easily. So it's a kind of a linear version of the novel. But what the film does is give such visual tip-offs, and I mean, what the novel can't do is add the music and add the imagery, which are so physical, and add the acting, which is just so astonishing. So I think the readers will find it fun to go back and forth between the novel and the actual film.
And you've edited and introduced a new Penguin Classic volume entitled Last Steps, The Late Writings of Leo Tolstoy. What intrigues me here are several themes: the price of fame, venturing out to the wilderness in search of isolation, and the eve of one's death. Can you guide the reader and the listener through how these ideas are reflected in his late writings in your collection?
Well, Tolstoy, is famous worldwide as a novelist, author of War and Peace and Anna Karenina and the Death of Ivan Ilyich, and even such great late novels as Haji Marat. But Tolstoy himself pretty much emotionally abandoned fiction in middle age and turned to God and religion and became something of a kind of a wandering prophet in his own mind anyway. And he attracted followers. Tolstoyans flocked to his doorstep, and he essentially created his own version of Christianity. And he became the prophet, the head prophet of his own church, with Chertkov as his leading disciple, Vladimir Chertkov. Now, all of these ideas were reflected in his various late essays, and one or two of his later stories, which are quite wonderful. For instance, in this collection, let's just take it from the top. I begin with his crucial turning point book, his Confession of 1882, where he said, "Look, I've been a heathen all these years. I've never really understood about God and the fact that I'm going to die and mortality and all this." And he sort of lays everything out in line and talks about how he was close to suicide when he suddenly began to feel the presence of God in the world and began to pray and began to read the Bible and to think about end things. And so that was a tremendous turning point in his life. And so I begin with an excerpt from his Confession of 1882. And then I move through a series of his major excerpts from his major late works on subjects such as religion, God, and the place of the soul in life. And then his essay, I give his essay on the necessity of vegetarianism, called The First Step. The first step is to give up eating meat. And then I include his essays on art. His essay, What is Art?, is a wonderful meditation on art in terms and spiritual terms and what art should mean. And Tolstoy remained interested in literature to the end. For instance, I include here a very, very late essay, 1906 or 7, that he wrote, which is just shortly before he died, on the life and work of William Shakespeare, a really strange and remarkable piece of literary criticism. Tolstoy must be one of the few people in the history of the world who didn't like Shakespeare, or who it's not that he didn't like Shakespeare, but he thought Shakespeare was immoral because he didn't take a moral standpoint in his work, that he really reflects so many different viewpoints in the course of his writing life. The essay also includes his wonderful studies of religion. So there's a last essay which is written just before he died on End Things, which is a very beautiful meditation on life and death, the progress of the soul, and how one gets closer to God. Tolstoy was quite a theologian in his own terms, a very eccentric one, but certainly very bracing to read his essays. And finally, there's a very late story of his, which I think is a beautiful folk tale, called Alyosha Gorshak, about a young peasant man who dies fairly early. It's in many ways a kind of companion piece to the death of Ivan Ilyich. It's a wonderful piece. So I think these late writings are a kind of final harvest of the great man and a writer who turns his attention to matters of life and death and moves away from fiction in his later writing.
Well, this will certainly be a gift for all the readers of Tolstoy's works. And, I wanted to talk also about your experience with your college students and teaching Tolstoy in general. What themes resonate the most with your students, and what do they come back to class after class?
Well, students are attracted to Tolstoy because he's such a clean, vivid writer. There's no baloney about Tolstoy. Unlike Dostoevsky, who's rather mystical and often very difficult to read, Tolstoy's never difficult to read. Tolstoy was a simple, straightforward writer. I think he was possibly the greatest novelist who ever lived. Students are always, open mouths when they read through War and Peace and Anna Karenina. The death of Ivan Ilyich always hits people right in the gut as a shock because it's such a direct look at life and death and ask the question, what do we hold dear in life? And what is the purpose of life? I mean, Tolstoy wasn't afraid to ask the big questions and to answer them, in effect. So students are and in reading his essays, students are often moved by his direct, simple approach to life, His view of Christianity often irritates those students who have a kind of, shall we say, fundamentalist view of Christianity. Tolstoy did not believe in the divinity of Christ, but he believed that Christ was a kind of prophet. So it's very much a Jeffersonian view of the Bible that Tolstoy took. Remember, Thomas Jefferson went through the New Testament and edited out all of the mystical and supernatural bits and focused on the ethical teachings of Christ, which is essentially what Tolstoy did too.